So, today we're just going to be working through all of the possible available arguments on this question of whether or not it's right or wrong, or permissible, obligatory perhaps even, to eat a cheeseburger. That's a logical possibility, right? We could say everybody has a moral obligation to eat cheeseburgers. Is anybody thinking, like, I think I might defend that position today? Maybe? Okay, moral obligation too. You got your work cut out for you. Seems like a lot of it hinges on this question of moral permission versus moral prohibition, right? Is it okay to do it? Not that you have to, but it is allowed. Or would we say, like, it's like, you're not going to get arrested for doing it, but it's not okay. You're doing something wrong when you're doing it. Before we get into looking at the arguments, I want to make a point that I hope everybody understands, but I think, like, I know I need reminding sometimes, so maybe that means some of you guys need reminding as well. It is really, really difficult to honestly assess arguments when you already have a dog in the fight, right? When you already have some position that you're like, I think I know which way I already believe. Sometimes our beliefs about the conclusion kind of lead the way that we look at the arguments, right? They lead the way, or they color the way that we look at the premises. And at some point during this semester, before spring break, we'll talk about all of the psychological biases that are built into our stupid brains that lead us to make these sorts of mistakes. It's impossible to not do at all. But as an exercise, in the classroom at least, for the next 45 minutes, see if you can suspend your judgment, or at least act as if you suspend your judgment, so that we can look at the reasons that are on offer and let those reasons determine what we believe, rather than having what we already believe determine which reasons we'll accept. Does that seem fair enough? Because if this is going to be like a genuine discussion, one that can like plausibly be productive, we all have to enter into this at least entertaining the possibility that we might change our minds in the process. That could mean those of us who think that it's wrong to eat a cheeseburger might end up having to change our minds. Those who think that it's okay to eat a cheeseburger might end up having to change their minds. And having to, what do we mean having to? It's not like you're going to be forced. It's not like I'll even threaten you with a bad grade. It's that the reasons will be so compelling that if you are in fact thinking for yourself, you'll let the reasons take you where they will. Okay, we've looked at one argument already. What does that argument look like? Somebody give me like a basic, like as rough a sketch of that argument as possible. Yeah?
Wasn't it something like if comparing eating meat to like crushing kittens because you like the sound it makes?
That's right, yeah. So what do we call these arguments that seem to hinge on a comparison? Yeah, arguments by analogy, or an analogical induction, right? So we have an argument by analogy, which if you're writing on the board is good to just write the whole word out. Don't stop halfway through. Argument by analogy here is stomping kitten heads because I like the sound is more or less, let's say it's similar. I'll do the little squiggly equals, right? It's similar to eating a cheeseburger simply because I like the taste. It seems like it goes a step beyond this. It says also that, like, most people agree with this. Or at least I agree with this, right? Do you agree with this? In the intervening time since I first made this argument, where do we stand on this? Is stomping kitten heads because I like the sound morally unacceptable? Is there anybody who's like, no, it is morally acceptable? Yes.
I'd say based on the structure of our country and the way we've been raised to believe that certain animals have higher values than others, we could see it as morally objectionable. But if you go to somewhere like India and they hold cows to be extremely sacred,
right?
It'd be like stomping kitten heads. No big deal. But
I don't think they do think that in India, by the way.
I'm not saying they do think that. I'm just by comparison.
Okay, but we might find a culture who thinks that stomping kitten heads is okay.
Or
And I don't know, I'm kind of curious, how would you feel about that culture?
you know,
Would you want to live in that culture?
if I were raised there, yes. If not, no.
If you were raised there, yes. If not, no?
If I were
Okay.
raised there, I wouldn't know any different. Well,
That seems to imply that nobody can ever look around at their own culture and say, like, I don't like the way this is, let's change it. Or if anybody ever, if we were thinking about cultural relativists who say that whatever your culture says, that determines what is right within the context of your culture, anybody that did critique their culture would be wrong, right? They'd be a villain. So like Rosa Parks, villain. Susan B. Anthony, villain. We do sometimes look around at our own culture and say, like, I was raised this way, but I don't care for it. Or I recognize contradictions in the way I was raised. Pardon me. So, all right, we have a pretty good, not agree, most people disagree with this. And because I think most people disagree with this, and because I think this is like your average cheeseburger eating experience for most people, I think most people should also say that, therefore, most people should disagree with this. Because of that similarity. If we were going to map this argument, it might look something like this. The two are similar. Let's call this like premise 1. The two are similar. And I'll give all kinds of reasons for why the two are similar. And because the two are similar, and let's say, because the two are similar, and stomping a kitten head is wrong, let's call that one 2. Then we'll say, therefore, eating a cheeseburger is wrong. Let's call that one 3. And these will be all the various similarities that we can articulate between the two. Does that seem like a decent map of that argument? We got some sense of how that argument ticks? All right, let's leave that argument alone. What other arguments do we have? Either for or against the idea of eating a cheeseburger? Yes, Olivia.
Eating meat is okay as long as the animal is an adult.
So we say if the animal is an adult, then it's okay to kill it. For any reason whatsoever?
I guess it would be.
For certain reasons.
For meat that's going to not just.
If an animal is an adult, then it's okay to kill it for meat. And this could explain why kittens are not adult cats by definition, right? Sometimes we call adult cats kitties. Like, oh, he's a little kitten. But only the baby ones are really kittens. Whereas the cows are full grown because we never kill young cows for meat. Well, we might say veal. Veal would not be okay.
People are not okay with veal.
Yeah, but adult cows are okay to eat. So, therefore, adult cow cheeseburgers are okay. Because what? Adult cows are adults, and adult animals are okay to kill for meat. That's a rough modus ponens, right? If an animal is an adult, then it's okay to kill it for meat. The cow is an adult. Therefore, adult cow cheeseburgers are okay. Pretty straightforward modus ponens argument, right? If I was going to map it, it'd go like this. Any other arguments? Before we get into any other arguments, do we want to stop and take a look at this argument? Maybe we want to decide, do we want to leave it up on the board? Yes?
I've actually read studies about this, and most breeds that we eat are actually made from younger cows.
So this would actually this would be a special kind of cheeseburger, in fact, because most beef comes from young cows. This seems like an empirical point that we might want to clear up. somebody in the class says, I read it somewhere, and we might say, like, well, where did you read it? If only, like, everybody had, like, the internet in their pockets, and we could decide this decisively here and now. Yeah, let's get some folks fact-checking that on the fly and see how it works out. I can think of, so the counter-argument here would be something like, this would not actually cover most cheeseburgers. This would be a rare sort of cheeseburger. It would probably be a $30 cheeseburger at, like, a very fancy restaurant, maybe. And that's not most of the cheeseburgers you're eating. I can think of at least another response to this. If an animal is an adult, then it's okay to kill it for meat. The cow is an adult, therefore the adult cow's cheeseburgers are okay. What if I just, instead of cow, I said a human? A grown-up human. Are we still going to stand by this? Baby humans, that's just gross to kill them for meat. The adolescents, it's a gray zone. But adults, why not, right?
Yes.
And notice I didn't change this premise at all to make this argument that seemed a little kooky. And this premise is true, right? An adult human is an adult? Let's specify. Adult human is adult. I'm not expecting a whole lot of pushback on that premise. I think that's pretty obviously true, that adult humans are adults. Therefore, the adult human cheeseburger, maybe we put that in quotes, would be okay. Do we disagree with this conclusion? Do you believe that? Olivia, you put forward the first version of this argument. Would you say that conclusion is probably false? Yeah, so if this is false, and it's got this premise, and this premise, I lost it. This premise seemed actually true. Is that argument valid? Is it valid? You guys have an exam due at midnight tonight. Is that argument valid? Yes, it's a modus ponens form of an argument. So it's definitely valid. And if it's valid, and it's got at least one false, and it's got a false conclusion, it has to have at least one false premise as well. It ain't that one. So it's got to be this one. It seems like that premise is false. We might want to adjust it. We might want to say, like, haha, you got me, Rosenfeld. Let's just change that first premise to, if a non-human animal is an adult, then it's okay to kill it for meat. Adult humans are not non-human animals, so then that argument wouldn't necessarily work. But then we've got like another conversation about like why? Like why do humans get off the hook and not other animals? That might even be begging a premise like this if we make it about non-human animals. That might be begging the question. That might be exactly what's on the line. True. Yeah, I am assuming that whoever's eating it is human. And I think I'm okay with that for now because I'm talking to you guys and you're all humans? Okay. More or less, probably. Some lizard people, some androids. Yes?
Michigan State University, quoting the USDA, says that most cows that are slaughtered are between 12 and 24 months.
Most cows that are slaughtered, according to Michigan State?
Michigan State quoting the USDA.
Quoting the USDA. That's a pretty reliable source, I think. The USDA says that most cows that are slaughtered are between 12 and 24 months. That's 1 and 2 years. Does that count as a not adult cow? What's the lifespan of a cow? 15 to 20 years. I think that counts as not an adult. Just, oh, I don't know, but maybe. Now we might be into like zoological territory that I don't know if any of us have a right to weigh in on and say like, no, this is when a cow becomes an adult, when he's bar mitzvahed, right? The first time he stands up for justice. Yeah.
I was just going to say it would depend on when the reproductive age.
When the reproductive age is met, which would mean that, like, for humans, that's going to be, what, somewhere around, like, 12 or 13? That's when it's okay to eat them? Or treat them as adults? Which we don't typically hew to, but okay. All right. I'm also not, in general, can anybody tell I'm not impressed by this premise that says, like, adulthood is where it cuts off. After adulthood, it's okay to kill for meat. But before, I don't know, that seems like an arbitrary distinction to make. The human switch seems to reveal that there's something arbitrary about it. Yep.
One might make the argument that there's nothing morally wrong with killing something that doesn't think rationally. Since only humans think rationally, it's okay to do anything
Yeah, okay. It's okay to kill non-humans. Or let's say, it's okay to kill anything that can't think rationally, right? Non-human animals, I'll just put NHA. NHA can't think rationally. You got some exceptions in mind? Coco the gorilla, Alex the African gray parrot, or something like that?
I was going to say in general, like, as a whole species, not as, like, not individuals within species.
Oh, if the species is capable of thinking rationally. Ooh, that's interesting. Yeah, it cuts off something too, because I could very easily follow this one up the same way I did this one and say, like, these cognitively disabled people are not capable of thinking rationally, therefore we can kill them, right? So it's something about the species. Okay to kill not anything, any member of a species where the species can't think rationally, right? In general? So like across the board?
No, like,
No exceptions?
no,
Or most
there
of the
might be,
time?
like, some exceptions within, if you, like, generalize it, then there are those few exceptions.
So there might be a couple of exceptions, but they're exceptions to the rule. The rule still stands most of the time. Mostly. Non-human animals. Let's just make it cows then, right? Cows can't think rationally. Therefore, okay to kill cows. For any reason whatsoever? Or specifically for meat? It's okay to kill any member of a species that can't think rationally most of the time. And only when we're talking about meat, or just for any reason at all?
Saying it's not morally wrong.
Not morally wrong. Okay. Can kittens think rationally? Okay. So I can stomp them all I like. It's not morally wrong? According to this premise? Does that match your intuition?
No.
No. Not mine either. All right. That's an argument. I'm not sure if I believe that first premise. But okay. Yeah, Josh. If a species can be taught to think rationally, does that mean that it can think rationally? Are you in my modern class? No. Is anybody else here in my modern philosophy class? We're talking about that like last couple of days. Hold on. Let me try to answer Josh's question first. Can. Yeah, can's weird. Does it mean can right now versus can if we teach you? Jesse, you proposed the premise. How'd you mean it? When I say, okay to kill any species that can't think rationally, do we mean all on its own, left to its own devices? Or we could, if we could teach it, then we would say it can think rationally.
Just because you can teach some, like, it's like saying computers can think rationally. Like, they don't think themselves, they just learn a bunch of rules.
They just learn a bunch of rules,
They
yeah.
don't actually know what they're doing.
Yeah, so we could quote unquote teach somebody something, but they wouldn't necessarily know it. Boy, I can identify. You can try to teach somebody something, and they don't really know what they're doing. They just kind of like ape the motions, right? So that wouldn't count. So, but I suspect, Josh, you mean like really teach them how to do it by themselves, not just act like they're doing it. Are you suggesting that we can teach cows how to think, by the way?
No.
Okay.
But what defines rational thinking?
I am not sure if I'm confident to like stake out and say like this is what it is. But loosely, the ability to consider reasons. Do I think that cows sit there and like deliberate about reasons? Do I think that kittens deliberate about reasons? Does a kitten, I don't know, does a kitten look at a toy across the room or does a kitten look at a lizard and say to itself, maybe I should attack that thing? Then again, maybe not. What should I do? Or does it just kind of like run on instinct? Now, maybe it can be taught to think carefully. I don't know about my cats. My dog gets close. When I train my dog, I can see her trying to restrain herself sometimes. And I'm not sure if that means deliberation or that she's torn between two instincts or something like that. But if I say leave it alone and she really wants it, I can see her like, what should I do? She gets a little freaked out. Or if I'm trying to teach her a new trick and she's like, what do you want me to do? I can see like this kind of like, what should I quit? Should I stick with it? Like seems like there's something going on there. I can't get inside the dog's mind, so I have no idea what's going on there. I can't get inside your minds either, which is why I never have like a really good idea of whether or not you know what you're doing or you're just acting like you know what you're doing. But I can guess based on your behavior. I don't have enough one-on-one experience with cows to know whether or not I think that they are capable of deliberation. I don't know if I would call it rational. Where do we stand on this? Is this important enough that we should get straight on whether or not we think cows can be rational? What are your thoughts? Hands up, or do we need more clarification on this? Still not sure? Yeah.
Well, the point of this is supposed to like make you. Everyone thinks that stomping kittens' heads is bad, right?
I think it. Yeah, I think it. And you think it, right? We seem to.
Everyone here can actually articulate why they think that. But I'm trying to make it so.
I think I might be able to. I might be able to. It's not just like, oh, I've got a gut intuition, I'm not sure. I could appeal to a utilitarian principle.
Well, that's a Kantian principle, though. That's not fair.
Yeah, this is a little more Kantian than, yeah, but so, yeah, if I said like, this utilitarian principle explains why, and you're like, I don't buy utilitarian principles. I'm not sure necessarily that deontologists would say that, like, we don't buy utilitarian principles. They would just say those don't trump universal law. Yeah. But one of the things that, yeah, you might be pointing out, and maybe this is what you mean, maybe it's not, but like, has anybody else noticed this analogy goes just as easily the other way as it does this way? Like, if you say, like, I have an intuition that stomping kitten heads is wrong, like, that doesn't necessarily need to be the starting point. That could be, like, the end point that we're attacking. I could say, I have an intuition that eating a cheeseburger is okay. Stomping the kitten heads is pretty much the same as eating the cheeseburger. Therefore, I should think that stomping the kitten heads is okay. So maybe we should be equally suspicious or equally critical of our first intuition about this. Maybe this comes down to a question, though, of like, which one do you feel more strongly? Am I more sure about this one than I am sure about this one? Because analogies, particularly moral analogies, tend to work well when you're arguing from the case that you're pretty sure about to the one that you're less sure about, rather than the other way around. Yeah. Yes, William.
Is there an equivalent analogy to aborting babies because I like the freedom?
Because I like the freedom? I like the freedom. Do you get freedom from killing babies?
But you're not pregnant anymore.
Oh, that kind of kill. I wasn't pregnant to begin with, but so that's why I missed the boat. But okay. Yeah, there could be, although my sense is if that's the analogy that we're going to employ, that one's not even close to like more clear than the thing that we're talking about, right? That would take us into a quagmire that's actually really, really difficult to adjudicate. So I'll suggest, like, yes, that is a potential analogy that we could employ. I don't know if it's helpful because I think we'd end up splitting the room on our intuitions about that analogy. Yes, sorry.
One of the students about the cow stuff, like, I remember thinking rationally, but they're like, I don't know, you saw it on a farm growing up, like,
So you have had some good, like, one-on-one time with cows.
yeah,
This is a person whose opinion we should, like, take very seriously because she's got relevant experience.
I don't know all that, but like,
Okay.
they get like, they can be like really impressive, because like, we used to have like 3 cows, and one of them had to like, they were very old, and like, they would just like kind of lay on the ground like these, and one like basically hurt itself because it would like, it was like how in courses, like they, if they're separated or something, they do like episodes.
Yes, okay.
I don't know the whole thinking thing, I was thinking, I was like, okay.
Don't know if you'd call that rational thinking, but it's a sign of something that maybe deserves respect.
Yeah, that there's like empathy between the animals.
Okay, I'm going to recap that real quick because I'm almost positive that didn't get picked up on the microphone. And just for the sake of like the fine folks who are playing at home, you said something like, and this was something that you witnessed personally.
Yeah.
So you worked on a farm and there were 3 cows. There were 4 cows. There were multiple cows. There was a clump of 3 that were very, very close. And cows do bond. They are like they're herd animals, right? They're social critters. And one of those cows was removed. For what reason? Sent to the slaughterhouse for cheeseburger?
So they were getting pretty sick, and there was a point where like, if we
it had come to the end of its life, and it was a mercy killing. Okay, so there was a mercy killing for the cow that was very, very sick. I can sympathize with that. That doesn't seem like a crazy or an awful thing to do. But then the other 2 cows that were left got sad and depressed, and one of them refused to eat and eventually died because of it. Perhaps this is poetic license, but died of a broken heart. And horses will do the same thing as well. Horses also, like, very emotionally sophisticated creatures. Would that count as rationality? I'm not sure. Is rationality the key to this? Where I would say, like, if they're not rational, then, like, kill them at will. Maybe not. Maybe there's something, like, the emotional sophistication that's being demonstrated here is the sort of thing where you're like, I can make this cow's life better or worse. It can suffer or it can experience pleasure. This would be, like, we're starting to, like, appeal to a utilitarian principle, right? If something can suffer, it's morally significant. I should look to reduce the amount of suffering in the world. Cows will suffer when we slaughter them for food. Maybe. Maybe. Kittens will suffer when you stomp them. But we get something in exchange for that, by the way. We get a tasty, tasty burger and the beautiful sound of kitten heads. And so now it just becomes a question of, like, does it balance out? Which side of the scales, like, is heavier? I'm inclined to say that the beautiful sounds are not worth the dead kittens. I think I'm also inclined to say that whatever it is that I get out of eating a cheeseburger is not worth a cow life. That might not be the right ratio, by the way, because you can get many burgers out of a cow. Anybody want to just take a stab in the dark? Maybe we can fact check this one on the fly as well. If I said 40 hamburgers out of a cow, would that seem like not crazy out of the ballpark? Some folks are checking it. So whatever the human's experience would have to be greater than 1/40th of the value of a cow life, or whatever the number would be. I see people, like, doing the math here. Thinking, maybe. Cheeseburger can be very good. Yeah. Gordon.
I'm going to make an unpopular argument here.
You're going to make an unpopular argument here.
Yeah, and not like I only eat vegetables. I've just been waiting for an argument like this.
I'm curious, is it going to be unpopular? Do you believe it and you think it's going to be unpopular? Or do you not believe it, but you're just kind of trying to stir the pot?
I believe it, but I'm also hypocritical because I'm not going to follow it.
Oh, that's fine. Can we all agree, by the way, that, like, following through and, like, acting according to whatever moral principle we come up with is a completely separate issue from deciding what the moral principle is? Like, can we all agree that, like, it's entirely possible that I can say, like, that's the right thing to do, but it's very hard and I don't always do it? Okay, fair enough. So, Gordon, let's have it.
Killing the cow and eating cheeseburger is way worse.
Way worse?
Stomping on the kitten head. Way worse.
Way worse?
Way worse.
How much worse? Like, this much worse?
So much worse.
Okay.
This is
Why?
year, possibly 2 years of cow life.
Oh.
This is an animal that may not be able to think rationally, but we know that all mammals have, like, an emotional threshold. And that takes a little while to develop. These kittens are young, they don't know what's going on, they're hearing beautiful sounds until they die quickly and painlessly, as the cows are saying these terrible environments that people have been fighting against for years and years and years. They're suffering and suffering and suffering and suffering and suffering until they die and we eat them.
I don't necessarily know that the kittens were treated very well before they were stomped. But for the sake of argument, if they were treated well, then this would actually be way better than what we do to most
They
cows.
only suffered for 2 days if they weren't treated well.
That's right. And this is where I think some folks might say, like, not all cheeseburgers, right? Hashtag not all cheeseburgers. Because some cheeseburgers are, like, legit. Like, the cows were treated very, very well up until the moment that they were painlessly dispatched.
That's a small man.
They expired like a magazine subscription. And that would actually be better than the kittens, which now raises this question of, like, okay, if that's the kind of cheeseburger we're talking about, then we would all have to agree that, like, only those cheeseburgers are allowed to be eaten. And we'd also have to think to ourselves, does that actually fly? Better than stomping kitten heads ain't exactly the same thing as morally permissible, right? At least it wasn't the genocide of 9 million people, so it's okay, right? Like, just because I can point to something worse doesn't mean that this is acceptable. We might ask ourselves, like, would killing a cow painlessly make it okay? If we object to all of the suffering that comes along with basic concentrated animal feed organizations and factory farming, right? If we object to the factory farming conditions, but we would say, like, a humanely raised cow that's executed in a humane way, that would be acceptable. I see a lot of hands up, and are all the hands people who want to add to the argument? Oh, how many burgers? Yeah, how many burgers can you make out of a cow?
It depends on how much your burger weighs, but it says that you
Let's
can
call it a quarter pound.
from about 430 to 440 pounds of meat.
430 to 440 pounds of meat. And let's be honest, for a hamburger, we're not picky about the kind, like where the meat's coming from on the cow, right? So how do you, 430?
Well, it says 600 pounds of beef and 430 pounds of retail cuts.
Of retail cuts. And let's say they can all be ground up and made into burgers. Half-pound burger? I'm hungry. Are you hungry? Sure. Half-pound burger. So that means that we're looking at, ooh, wow, I was way, I said 40 before? I was way off. Killing a cow's a bargain. 860 half-pound burgers. From the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture. Do we trust them? Sure. On this, maybe not to babysit our kids, but like we trust them on this. Okay, good. So, yeah. The value of a cow would have to be roughly 860 times more valuable than the pleasure that I experience when I eat a cheeseburger. Now here's the difficult thing. I've eaten cheeseburgers before and they were very good. I'm not sure if I can reliably weigh that experience. First of all, I don't know if I can imaginatively multiply it by 860 times. Think of like something like, what's the best cheeseburger you ever had? Now imagine something approximately 860 times better. I'm like, okay, I guess, maybe, can I do that?
Yeah.
I can try. I'm not sure how much confidence I would have in my judgment. And then I would have to compare it to what I think the amount of value or the amount of pleasure or experience that's going to come from a cow living. And thanks to what we've had pointed out earlier, we now know also it's not just that cow that's affected. That cow has a family, and they're affected as well. Okay, Olivia.
I was gonna say, I have more of a problem with the cows being treated inhumanely all their life than I do with actually killing them, because when you kill them, that's just like a short time.
Yeah. I'm curious, are a lot of people feeling this intuition that it's like, it's the way that they're treated before they die, it's not the slaughter itself. If the slaughter's done humanely and painlessly, then it should be okay. Show of hands. Who thinks, let's call this the humane meat option. The humane meat option is morally acceptable. Hands for the humane, even the humane meat option is not acceptable. Any hands for this? I think I might be there too. Yeah, a couple of people. All right, just so that anybody still hanging on to like even the factory farm method meat, like that one's acceptable too. Anybody holding it? Like I don't care how the cow is treated or slaughtered, as long as I get the yummy cheeseburger, I'm cool. Is this for real, Josh? Okay, all right. Don't care how the cow is treated, so long as you get to eat it. Surely there are hypothetical scenarios that we can gin up that will like produce just like sadistic, profound amounts of torturing for the cows, right? Yeah. Yeah, I might be surprised if I like go watch some videos, I might be surprised at how weak my imagination was in comparison to what actually goes down. But I mean, some of the things that I've seen with the treatment of pigs at least has like and pigs are, by the way, like way more intelligent, like way better candidates for rational thinkers than cows are. And they're treated like grabbed by the hind legs and killed by like beating their heads against the ground. So let's say it takes me about 10 minutes to pull that off. And I'm not saying that's exactly what happens, but it's a possible scenario, right, Josh? It could take me 10 minutes to beat a pig to death by smashing its head into the ground. That suffering is not more important than the experience of eating a cheeseburger for you? Okay. and you don't care. You don't care about the suffering that the pig experiences at all. So you'd be okay also with the stomping of the kitten heads, presumably, as long as they didn't as long as you didn't have any emotional attachment to the kittens. If they're stranger kittens, fuck them, right? Maybe not literally that. That's a different debate. But okay, fair enough. All right. Okay. All right. We've got a big gap to bridge between us. I think I might have a challenge finding common ground between us here. And I'll just double check like I did with Gordon. For real? Like you don't care about any suffering of any non-human animals? What about human animals? Do you care about the suffering of other humans? As long as it's not you, you don't care? Ah, okay, all right. Now I've got a better idea of where you're coming from. Yes, moving on.
Humane slaughtering. There's a lot of religious practices that involve slaughtering animals in inhumane ways, such as kosher beef has to be sliced their necks with a blade.
With a curved blades because it's supposedly it's going to stay sharper and they're all right. So in fact, this goes way back. A lot of biblical dietary restrictions are focused towards humane slaughter of animals. So I don't know. Does that might not bother some folks who are just I don't care about any animals at all. We might say something but God says. And we're I don't really care that God says I should be nice to the animals. Maybe because we don't necessarily buy into that. But I'm curious. What's the point?
I was saying because compared to modern methods, it's more inhumane. Captive bolt gun, which instantly kill them.
And so we've gotten better at killing them humanely.
But they're still religiously mandated that these practices.
That's true. So kosher beef might not be the most humane sort of beef. Or halal beef might not be the most humane sort of beef. Although, okay, all right. All right, good things to think about. Yes?
In response to the original argument by analogy, with the fact that humans are evolved to eat meat for nourishment and are not evolved to stomp kitten heads for nourishment?
Yeah. How is there a classroom with no eraser? There we go. Yeah. Just up your game, Rosenfeld. Don't erase shit anymore. All right, so we had these two arguments. I'm going to go ahead and erase them because I think we've kind of taken a pretty good gander at them already. We should probably add the argument that's been bouncing around here. There was this utilitarian argument. And it's not really clear which way it lands. Right? Does that seem clear? It's basically we're saying the cheeseburger question hinges on whether or not am I eating a cheeseburger is, what did I say, 860? Is approximately 860 times more beneficial than not killing the cow. And I'm not entirely clear which way that breaks. That's a tough sort of a mathematical operation to do. And now we have this argument that's being floated about it being natural, about a kind of there's a natural evolution.
Yeah, you don't really get any. The one doesn't really compare to the other.
It breaks this analogy, right? So yeah, there's a soft and a hard version of this argument. The soft version would just say these are dissimilar because we have not naturally evolved to do this, whereas we have naturally evolved to do this, and that might very well be an important dissimilarity between these two cases. Seems relevant to whether or not it's moral, and maybe this breaks the analogy. I could do a harder version of this argument where I just say, forget about the analogy. Let's just say, as long as you're naturally evolved to do something, it should be morally permissible. So eating meat is a product of natural evolutionary selection. Therefore, it's okay. Does that seem fair, like a fair representation of the point? So we can do a soft version where it just breaks the analogy, and we can do a hard version where we say, like, it's a positive argument that stands all by itself. Some hands up to respond to this, or something new? To respond to it? Yeah.
On the evolution of it, could you say that, like, since maybe because in the time we have always been eating cows, and kids have always been a pet, so we have always kind of come up knowing that cows were food and chickens were pets.
Yeah, that's...
Egyptians worship the cats, right? So,
Egyptians did worship cats.
yeah, so I'm like, it kind of grew up. Like,
Egyptians also did some other stuff that we don't do anymore, like mummify dead people. But, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. So there's something that's close to this, and maybe, James, you can tell me if you think that this is the same argument, or you think it's a very different sort of argument. We can make an appeal to tradition as well. Not so much as a form of natural evolution, but we can say, like, we have cultural traditions of doing these sorts of things. That might be the sort of thing, like, we have cultural traditions that say we treat pets a certain way and livestock a different way, and cats traditionally are pets, and cows traditionally are livestock. Do you think that's the same argument, James?
I don't.
You think it's very, very different?
I think it's a weak.
Which, it's weaker. Okay, so this is seems like it's a weaker version of this? Okay. Does everybody else agree with James? That, like, the appeal tradition is a weaker version of this? Anybody think that, like, oh, it's weak, all right, but that one's not really any stronger? Sean? Yeah. That's true. Evolution means change, and, like, we could be on the cusp of, like, a new change. An evolution that's driven by, I don't know, what, maybe moral deliberation instead of, like, mere survival and passing on your genes. Because I don't know how much Animal Kingdom you guys watch. The sorts of traits that are selected for in natural selection can be pretty brutal. And not to, like, use unnecessarily traumatic sorts of imagery or examples here, but I think it maybe is important to, like, pick this one up. Rape is an incredibly powerful tool in making sure that your genes get passed on. This is a trait, like, the tendency to rape is something that is selected for when we're looking at reproductive fitness. Can we all agree that rape is not okay just because it's natural? And maybe even we could argue that we've evolved to have a tendency to rape. If you know anything at all about duck reproduction, holy shit. How baby ducks are made is awful. But that's a product of a natural selection, right? And if that was us, would we just be like, yeah, that's how it goes? Or would we say, like, I think we're maybe mentally sophisticated enough. This is maybe an important part about being rational, too. So we're mentally sophisticated enough to kind of get in the driver's seat of our own evolutionary change and say, like, we're going to try to do good things now, not just the things that allow us to survive. Other things like not caring about whether other people get hurt and only caring about yourself and your family, those are also evolutionarily advantageous. I'm not sure how morally respectable they are. I agree this is weaker than this one. I also agree with Sean that I'm not sure how compelling this one is. Yes?
When you actually look at the evolution of human diets and whatnot, we're most actually adapted to eating a fruit-based diet.
That's true, too. If we want to make an appeal to nature, we might say, like, for the vast majority of human history, we have eaten, at the very least, very little meat. It's really hard to come by. It's only relatively recently in human agricultural history that we've devised the sorts of methods that are necessary to give, how many times a day do you say you eat meat? How many times a day? All 3 meals? Once? Once? If every single human... Could every single human on Earth eat meat once a day? Would that be sustainable? Only if we employed certain sorts of practices that have a tendency to be really inhumane. They bothered us earlier in the discussion. So if you want to treat animals well, if we're going to stick to that, like, humane meat option, that seems like it's necessarily going to mean less meat and probably more expensive meat as well. And maybe that's okay. We haven't even gotten into whether or not the humane option is morally permissible, but maybe we don't need to get to it because there's still plenty of hands. Yes?
I just have a question.
Mhm.
Talking about nutrition and value, could you in some way, I guess, kind of like use statistics, because now it seems like red meat, specifically beef, is bad for your diet. So could you use that?
Yeah, and this is like slightly different. Some folks, I noticed on the discussion boards at least, have made a reference to like, I need to eat meat in order to get some sort of nutritional value. One of the obvious comebacks to that is to say like, no, you don't. No, you don't. And some people come back and they say like, actually, I do. I have a rare dietary disorder that makes it like almost impossible for me to get enough of like all of the amino acids that I need from plant-based sources. And for that person, I say, okay, you're off the hook. Like whether or not you're healthy is indeed on the line. But for most of us, whether or not we're healthy is not. Like you don't have to eat cheeseburgers to be healthy. And we maybe have emerging evidence that says if you stop eating them, you're probably actually going to be healthier. Even if you only cared about yourself.
I haven't eaten meat red meat in a long time.
In a long time, because you care about yourself.
But I eat chicken.
And maybe a little bit the cows. Well, chickens are stupid. Who cares about them? Have I missed any really big counter arguments to the idea that like maybe it's not okay? Sean?
Well, you bring the question of right to life,
How come animals don't have as strong a right to life as humans? I don't necessarily know that they don't. I don't necessarily know that they don't, and there are plenty of folks who talk about animal rights that say, like, no, they don't. And to say that humans have a stronger right to life than animals is speciesist. And this is only just a little bit different than garden variety racism. If you don't like racism, which is the arbitrary decision that, like, my race is better than all the other races and more important.
What about the ecological impact?
There, we could talk about the ecological impact. That's going to be something that gets factored into the utilitarian argument, right? We could make a rights-based approach. We could also say something like, well, here's the reason why animal lives count less than human lives, because humans are capable of things like music and poetry and philosophy. We can have like dizzying highs in our lives. But cows can't do philosophy or make art or anything like that, and that's why their lives aren't as valuable, maybe as a utilitarian argument. We could say that they don't possess all of the same capacities that humans do, such as the capacity for rational thought, and this makes their lives less valuable. Doesn't necessarily mean not valuable at all, but less valuable, perhaps. Yeah. Yes? The modest proposal? The Irish, like, we'll just cook up Irish children and eat them? Solve two problems at the same time? Both the lack of food and this problem with, like, too many Irish children? This is not me, by the way. This is a Jonathan Swift essay, and it's satirical. I'm curious about this, too, for those who say, like, humane meat. Humane meat will be morally acceptable. If the animals were raised specifically to be slaughtered, and they were treated well the whole time, and when we slaughtered them, we did it painlessly, and P.S., the animals are human animals, does the fact that they were slaughtered humanely comfort you at all? You might say it's better than if they were tortured the whole time. But it's not like magically okay just because we were nice to them before we killed them. There's another potential analogy there, right? If that's wrong for humans, why would it be any different for cows? But I think in our discussion we've kind of like garnered some ammunition for why we might say like, these analogies are tricky because I can think of lots of difference between humans and cows. Last comment and then we'll wrap it up. There are no analogies that are foolproof. Arguments by analogy are likely sorts of arguments. Stronger than that? I don't know. I'll keep thinking about it. Yeah. You guys keep thinking about it as well. Perhaps even thinking about it while you're eating. Well, I don't know. Maybe make that jump from thinking to doing. And keep your eyes peeled. You have an assignment that's based on giving an argument analysis of what's going on in this debate.